All right, folks, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered for this Wednesday, we've got a jam-packed show. First off, Senator Elizabeth Warren will be joining us, giving her thoughts on a wide variety of issues as she's on the campaign trail. Also, former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, sentenced to 7.5 years. Is it enough? So the judge just ripped him for being an absolute liar. The college admission scandal is still taking center stage as Lori Loughlin, the actress, turns herself in to FBI. And parents charged are placed on leave. And coaches are also fired. We'll talk to a black woman who went to jail for trying to get her kids into a better school district. Will the rich and powerful suffer the same fate? Also, Alabama Senator and former U.S. Attorney Doug Jones weighs in on whether those parents should go to prison. And speaking of my conversation with Senator Elizabeth Warren, we talked about black wealth, home ownership, and access to capital for small black-owned businesses. Folks, we've got a jam-packed show. Let's roll. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time, and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, Paul Manafort, the former chairman of the Trump campaign, is sentenced today to 43 months in prison on charges of money laundering, obstruction of justice, and failing to disclose lobbying work that earned him tens of millions of dollars over more than a decade. Federal Judge Amy Berman Jackson said, quote, "It is hard to overstate the number of lies and the amount of fraud and the amount of money involved. There is no question that this defendant knew better and he knew what he was doing." Now, last week, another federal judge sentenced Manafort to 47 months in prison, so all told, about 7.5 years. Now, he could have gotten 24 years last week, but that judge was quite lenient. This time was a little different. Manafort's attitude was even different. Came in telling the judge he showed remorse and also that, that he's 70 years old and his wife is 66 years old, and therefore he wanted to spend time with her because he needed to be with her. Should have thought about all of that before you were stealing millions of dollars. Now the question is, will Donald Trump pardon Manafort? Now, that could very well be the case, but the folks in New York have said, we're going to make that harder. As the same day Manafort got sentenced in D.C., literally shortly right after. I'm talking about on the heels of the announcement of that sentencing, Manhattan DA slapped him with a 16-count grand jury indictment charging Manafort with mortgage fraud, falsifying business records, and conspiracy. If convicted, he could get up to 25 years in state prison. And guess what? Donald Trump can't do a damn thing about a pardon for state crimes. Joining us right now is Robert Patillo, civil rights attorney, Deshandra Jefferson, principal of the Arabian Group. Robert, I'll start with you. Look, attitude totally different for Paul Manafort today. Asking for remorse. This judge did go down a couple of years in terms of sentencing, but she was very tough on Paul Manafort. And then, of course, for New York to come out with their 16-count indictment, they're making it perfectly clear. Donald Trump, you can pardon your boy, but we're going to send his ass to jail.
Well, two points on this. One is this point on judicial discretion and the fact that we need to be paying more attention to House and Senate Judiciary hearing committee hearings, because Donald Trump has had the opportunity to replace over 100 federal judges on the national level. We pay so much attention to the Supreme Court bench, but the lower court benches is where laws really getting made, and he's putting his imprint on America for the next 50 to 100 years under the radar. Regardless of what happens in Congress and in the Senate and everything else, These judges are going to be on the bench for lifetime appointments. Many people getting appointed are in their early 30s and may serve until their 80s or 90s. That's point one that we have to understand with the Manafort issue. Point two, on the question of the state charges in Manhattan, they may be dubious at best. Because under the double jeopardy clause, if Paul Manafort's lawyers are able to argue that he has already been tried, convicted, and sentenced on these issues, then the court will not allow them to simply retry him on the state level for the exact same issues.
But Deshandra, these are different issues. If you look at these charges here, they are far different than what he was charged on the federal side. Also, Mueller was also working with state attorney generals. He was working with Eric Steiderman before he had resigned because of all of his drama. And so they've been very careful to ensure, Robert just said, doesn't happen.
Well, first of all, you know, and I respect your fact that you're a lawyer, but I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think that they wouldn't have brought charges for it if they didn't think they had a solid case. You know, and Tish James, she's coming out the gate strong. She's coming out the gate hard. She's going to make a point with this case.
Right, and again, for her, that's still separate. This is the Manhattan DA. She's a state attorney general. The state could still go after Paul Manafort.
And I think they will. I mean, I think you see here, people, there is a case against Paul Manafort. You know, and you're right. They have been working with Mueller because there's some things he can't quite get these people on, but he's turning them over to, you know, like this county, the state, whomever, because there's something going on. Like, let's continue following the money with Manafort. Let's continue following the money. There is something going on here. And, you know, Trump, he's had his henchmen. You know, they've all been quiet, but I think this is a big domino. And if we could take out Manafort, who knows what else we're going to find about, you know.
We also, first of all, we talked to Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts, earlier today. This is what she had to say about the Paul Manafort decision. Senator Warren, I want to start this way. First off, with the news of the day, Paul Manafort, more years given to him for fraud he committed against the federal government. Also, the folks in New York have also filed charges, the Manhattan DA. What does it say that the president's campaign chairman is headed to federal prison and potentially state prison for violations against the American people?
Oh, it means that the President of the United States must hear the hoofbeats of these indictments bearing down on him. You know, it just keeps getting closer and closer and closer. And we still, of course, haven't seen the main investigation to come out. But right now, it just keeps multiplying.
One of the things that also jumps out when you talk about the trust of the American people. Look, some 30-odd people have been caught up in these investigations. And, of course, Trump keeps yelling, no collusion, no collusion, no collusion. But every time there is a guilty plea, every time there is a sentence, to me, that speaks to the kind of people who he is surrounding himself with. And I don't recall any of these kind of guilty pleas and folks going to prison under President Barack Obama.
No, that's exactly right. And, you know, the fact that we've gotten, I think it's, 34, nearly 3 dozen, either indictments or guilty pleas right now, just in the Mueller investigation, and now more and more investigations opening up, just tells you something about this whole administration, and before it was an administration, what the campaign was like, and before it was a campaign, what his business dealings were like. And this is something that doesn't just spring up on its own, like one day one person made a mistake. What we know here is that there is a big problem that swirls all the way around. It's like one of those giant hurricanes, and right at the center is Donald Trump.
Again, going back to our panel here, I mean, look, Trump can sit here and say no collusion, no collusion, but he is hearing the footsteps, Deshandra, of Robert Mueller. We also know that Robert Mueller's his budget goes through September. So all those early reports on CNN saying, oh, it's going to be done in a week, it's going to have his report. First of all, I keep telling people, ignore all of those reports. Okay? The Mueller team, they are not leaking anything.
No, they're not.
You'll know when Robert Mueller is done when he's done.
Well, I mean, the news needs something to report on. Listen, everyone's following Mueller. Everyone wants to know when something's going to come out. This is going to be, you know, This could be possibly the next Watergate, if not bigger. But I think the thing we also have to look at is Congress. You know, we have a lot of subpoena-happy Democrats. We have a lot of Democrats who are finally getting their turn at being in the majority. You know, what we saw in Benghazi, we're going to see on the House side now. We're going to see a lot of investigations. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming out. I think that this is going to be a slow leak. I think that we're going to be learning more and more each day. I don't think there's just going to be one big data dump and, you know, one big final resolution, because even with Mueller's investigation, we have the House investigating. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming out.
Robert, again, Trump can yell all he wants to. 30-plus different people who have been charged and convicted. That's an issue.
It absolutely is an issue, but I do think the over-reporting of it by the media takes the sting out of it. When any other president, if his former campaign manager went to jail for 7 years, it will be the biggest story in their entire administration.
Well, first of all, he's had so many scandals that it's also a little hard to say one is a major deal when it's one after another. I mean, look, he's had 3 cabinet members, okay, who had to bounce out, and you still have all the other drama. One is still there. Wilbur Ross, who's been lying about his wealth, lying about assets being sold. I mean, other people who have been forced out. Trust me, if the old rules applied, at least 75% of people serving him will be gone.
But I think the issue is that when you have an oversaturation of information, you end up with a lack of penetration of information. So when people are just simply surrounded by this swarm of, Russia, collusion, Cohen, Gates, Papadopoulos, Manafort, it ends up becoming just white noise in the background. And that's what the issue is with CNN and MSNBC and other networks.
Because Trump is that corrupt. I mean, he's got literally so much corruption around him. It's like, look, you can't help but report it, but it also shows the kind of people who he hires and likes being around.
But what ends up happening is then when Trump misspells hamburger in a tweet, that's a day-long news cycle. If he misspells coffee and says cofefe, that's a day-long news cycle.
First of all,
it becomes static.
Well, because also we understand the games that some people are playing where they know that he drives ratings and stuff along those lines. Now, one story that everybody is definitely talking about is the college admission scandal involving all these rich white parents charged with felonies to get their kids into elite schools. Folks, it is beginning to take a toll on the alleged perpetrators. The head of a big-time law firm in New York and a partner at a hedge fund that owns the powerhouse agency CAA, both have been put on leave. The FBI showed up at the actress Felicity Huffman's home yesterday at 6 a.m. to make the arrest. Well, today, Lori Loughlin, who played Aunt Becky on Full House, turned herself in to the FBI. Both are now out on bail and are unlikely to see the inside of a jail for some time or ever. Now, earlier today, I talked to Doug Jones, a United States Senator from Alabama, of course, who served as U.S. Attorney under President Bill Clinton, and asked him that question as to whether or not these parents should go to jail. This is what Senator Jones of Alabama had to say. Senator Doug Jones, glad to have you here. So you've been a senator, about a year and a half now?
Not quite a year and a half, about 15 months.
Are you ready to go back home?
No.
This place is a little different.
I go back home to visit and see what my folks are saying, and that's what I do. This place is a little bit different, a lot different than the Senate I worked in 1979 and 1980. But it's, we can get some things done if people just talk to each other. And it's hard to do.
Now, I do have to ask you this. You were U.S. Attorney under Bill Clinton. And this cheating scandal, this college cheating scandal, and it's been blowing up my social media feed. Sure. A lot of African Americans are going, wait a minute, we've seen black folks go to jail trying to get their kids in different schools for quality education. Should these parents go to jail?
Well, I don't know. In federal court, you got these sentencing guidelines. It's all going to depend on how much money's involved. There's a lot of factors. I think some of these folks are going to hit pretty hard. I don't know about the parents. The people, traditionally folks paying a little bit don't always get the same sentence as the receiving end. These coaches, these administrators, they're really getting
$500,000. One person $1.2 million to get to Georgetown.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I think you will see some of them go to prison. You won't see all of them. I think you'll see some of them. But I think the folks on the receiving end certainly are going to go to prison.
Well, and for a lot of people, again, they're angry.
Oh.
Because, oftentimes I always talk about even with legacy, people want to be very critical of affirmative action. But when you look, Harvard, almost 30% of all their incoming freshmen are legacy.
Right.
And a lot of those
That's
people don't have the grades.
That's exactly right.
Mom and daddy or grandmama and granddaddy went there.
You know, it's ironic. It was just ironic as it could be. I was in a education committee, the help committee yesterday, and we had a whole panel there talking about how do we simplify the FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid, because it's so dang complicated. So many people, especially underserved, students of color, people are not making much income. They look at this thing and they can't figure it out, and they just give up, and they leave so much money on the table. And now I'm sitting there getting this alert from the Washington Post that says that these, rich parents are breaking the law by trying to bribe people to get in. The irony was just too great for me, and I made a comment about it. It's, we got to do a better job in this country. It's just amazing that people would actually go to that lengths just to get in when they can go to a lot of great colleges.
And so one of the things that many black folks have been talking about on social media has been African Americans who have gone to prison as a result of trying to get their kids into better schools. Kelly Williams Bolar of Ohio was convicted of lying about her residency to get her daughter into a better school district. She served 10 days in jail, was put on probation for 3 years. She joins us right now. And Kelly, glad to have you here. Your story, and the reason we're talking about this is because here you have these rich parents who are trying to circumvent a system, bribing folks to get their kids into these elite schools. You were trying to ensure that your kids got the best education possible, not college, but in primary and secondary. And so talk about, again, how the public treated you differently than how the law enforcement treated you differently than how they might treat these rich parents.
Well, as we see what happened with me, I went to jail. They made sure that I was made an example of. And that's what's going to me. I don't know yet. We don't know what's going to happen. But to me, that's what we're going to see where the line will be drawn. We will find out. I want to know if they're going to set an example for these rich elite parents.
And again, you went to jail, but also share with people the impact your case also had on your family. Your father was impacted.
Absolutely. My dad and I both stood trial together. They could not find anything on him. So they just started looking for things because he didn't enroll them, I did. So the next thing I know, they indicted my father. Once our trial was over, they indicted my father, telling him that he basically lied about his income of his disability. He was a sick man. They sent him to prison. He never came home. He died there. And that is part of my advocacy. I fight all the time. I fight every day for our children and our communities because of my father's plight and his death behind this education whole thing.
You have these rich parents, again, some paying upwards of $1.2 million to get their kids in, faking as if they were also athletes, getting them into school in Yale as a soccer player or on the crew or the water polo team at the University of Southern California. What does this say about, again, race and class and how you were treated and how people said, how dare you do this for your children when your kids were getting a substandard education and you simply wanted them to have a shot at life? Here you're dealing with rich, spoiled, bratty-ass kids. One of them who said, Laura Laughlin's daughter, I don't really care about school. I just want to be able to go to college for the parties and game day.
Well, it's all about the socioeconomic background. I'm just a mom, a divorced mom, just trying to make my way. Just living in, at the time I was living in the metropolitan housing after I got my divorce. So yeah, they hammered me down. They treated me as they put venom in my veins. So to prove a point, to set an example for anyone else that wanted to do as I had done. I want to see what's going to happen. I am sitting back and I'm just twiddling my fingers. I want to see what's getting ready to take place. I want to see if they do a day in jail.
Well, and there was another story. There was a black woman who was homeless and also was sent to jail because she was trying to enroll her kids into a school.
Right. She was homeless. and I know who that is. And the name is, I'm getting fogged up with the name right now, but yes, I absolutely know who that was. And she was, I mean, look at her situation. She was homeless, and you still send her to penitentiary? What's, you know, and we have the Garcias, you know, the situation with them as well. So this is a black brown issue. And as we see as our country, you see how this unfold and develop. My whole thing is God don't like ugly, and he ain't too fond of pretty. That's what mom used to say. And we're going to see what happens.
All right, Kelly Williams-Bowler, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to go to my panel here. Again, this is for the people out there who don't understand. Look, these kids could have gone other schools. Yeah. But it was this whole deal of, no, we want our child to be in the elite school. Because frankly, these parents want to be able to say, our child is at Yale, or is at USC, or is at UCLA, or Wake Forest, or these type of schools. And here you have black parents out here who have been sentenced to substandard schools, and they're trying to get the best for their kids and are treated like absolute criminals. Now, granted, these folks were arrested, but let's just be honest. They're going to get treated a hell of a lot different than Kelly Williams-Bowler did and some of these other black parents.
Oh, no, there's no question. I mean, first of all, this is all about access. These are parents. These are wealthy parents. They can afford to send their kids to the best schools, you know, best boarding schools, best private schools. They can hire the best tutors. They can do the very best for their children. They want more. They want additional access beyond what they can even purchase for their kids. And what galls me is these children don't even seem grateful. They're oblivious to everything that their parents are doing on their behalf. Yet these will probably be the same kids who will turn to you or I and say, well, I got in here based on merit.
Well,
not my
they're
race.
shocked and not grateful. I mean, because first, look, one of the young girls who was at Georgetown was literally joking with the guy who took the test how they cheated to get in. I mean, look, there's nothing about any of these kids they talked about gratitude if you got to cheat to get in.
Well, and this goes to that whole bootstrap argument that we always hear, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's hard when you ain't got boots. And education, the singular most important differentiating point between poverty and wealth, between being incarcerated and prospering in a middle-class lifestyle. The idea of this woman and others being jailed for sending their kids to schools outside their jurisdiction comes down to an issue of socioeconomics and race. Yeah. The reason those laws are in place for high schools, elementary schools, middle schools is because they don't want poor black and brown children polluting their nice elite white schools, and that's why they don't want you using someone else's address, and that's why they'll lock you up for it. On the other hand, with these rich institutions, this is the reason black folks ain't shocked, because we all knew this was going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
The minute you walked into school at your predominantly white institution for either undergrad or grad school, you realized that these folks were not here because of merit. You realized that there's a wing of the library named after their grandfather. Yeah. You realized that the law professor was their dad's college roommates, something along those lines. And the fact that we haven't addressed not just the biases which exist with regards to these, this is the most brazen federal fraud version of it. But when we're talking about legacies, when we're talking about people who are part of the same fraternity and sorority, we're talking about people who have the ability to contribute to a charity or contribute to an endowment, and that's what gets them into these schools. We have to address that from a systemic point. And the next time someone makes this argument about affirmative action, and well, what isn't that discriminating against white people because of their race? No, this is exactly what we're talking about. When you have 500 years to build up wealth, and now you can pay for your kids to go to the best schools, don't get mad at me because I get 1 extra point in admissions.
No, wait. Affirmative action, let's go back to that whole argument, because there's one thing that drives me crazy. It's like all of a sudden we're just, allotting these spaces for these poor black and brown kids who can't think for themselves and wouldn't get in otherwise. Affirmative action is supposed to help people who have been historically disadvantaged and left out of the system. It is a small Band-Aid over a huge gaping wound. The number of people that are admitted to these schools on affirmative action does not compare to the number of people who are legacies.
29% of Harvard's freshman class is legacy. And it was interesting about that is, so today on The View, this issue came up about legacy. And so this is what the conversation took place between Joy Barr as well as Meghan McCain. Here we go to my iPad.
Okay, there's such a thing as legacy admissions, which means if your parents went to Brown or Harvard or you know, UP, you can go. But it's interesting because the idea of legacy admissions is racist in nature, and I'll tell you why. It started in the 20s to keep out upwardly mobile immigrants who had started pushing for admission to elite schools.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a very, very bad system. Legacy. Why should your kid get in because you got in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the only thing I will say
That's
is
not
when
fair.
it comes to
I didn't have any. I was the first person in my whole family to go to college.
Military academies, my family goes back generations at the Naval Academy, and that's service to your country. So I would push back in that part of it because my grandfather, great grandfather, my brothers, they all served their country.
Yeah, but if you don't have the grades, why should you?
They did have the grades. My brother did, but I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of the fact that my family's legacy is at the Naval Academy. My father's buried there.
I'm not talking about your family. I'm talking about
legacy.
I'm talking about the policy of where legacy admissions came from.
I'm very proud of my family's legacy at the Naval Academy.
And Jews probably out of the colleges.
Well, let me say
that's what it's about.
Yeah, just one quick thing.
I gotta go.
Should they go to? My question is, will these parents go to jail? I mean, the U.S. Attorney said that there shouldn't be disparate treatment. I wonder, is the American public ready for these parents going to jail?
There are parents who are in jail for food stamp fraud.
Yeah.
And there are parents who are in jail for...
Okay, so here's what's funny there. First of all, Meghan McCain, I don't think quite understands the conversation. The conversation was not about the legacy of her family serving in the Navy. The conversation was just because your family, your great-grandfather, your grandfather, and your father served in the Navy, does that mean that your brothers or your children's children should automatically get into the U.S. Naval Academy as a result? That's the point.
No,
legacy.
she didn't want to answer the question because it's questioning her privilege. I mean, let's be honest. Meghan McCain got that job on The View because of who her father was. You know, they would not have been checking for her. You know, that name carries a lot of weight. They would not be checking for her if she went to ASU and came fresh out of college. Let's be real.
Well, Abby Huntsman, of course, you know, she got a job as co-host on MSNBC,
and
then they basically went to Fox, where they said we're going to teach her how to be a correspondent. I've never seen somebody black get a hire at a network to be taught how to do television, and then became Fox and Friends co-anchor, and then all of a sudden got The View as well. So go,
Anderson Vanderbilt.
Go ahead. Well, but the interesting thing here is, again, there's a difference between your family has a legacy, and just like my brother's an alpha, I'm an alpha. That's not a guarantee that my nephew is going to get in, because if he doesn't have the grade point average, you ain't getting in.
Look, there's nothing more hilarious in that clip than this white, blonde-haired woman completely misunderstanding the entire conversation. She is so enrobed in legacy, so enrobed in privilege, she doesn't understand when she says, well, my family goes back generations at the Naval Academy. That's the exact idea we're talking about. Your parents, your brothers, your grandfather probably all got in because one person 150 years ago got in and paved the way for everyone else. And guess what? 150 years ago, when your great-grandfather, whoever got into the Naval Academy, we weren't allowed in because we were still property. Yeah. So that's the entire concept around it.
Which means, Meghan, my great-grandfather, okay? So I don't have the opportunity for my great-grandfather to be able to be a legacy because he couldn't go.
Exactly.
See, and that's the thing.
And then you have to be twice as good to get in because you didn't have that legacy connection.
And that's the thing they don't quite understand. And that's why this whole thing is very interesting. And I'm telling you, as Kelly Williams-Bollard said, it's going to be real interesting to see how these parents are treated in the legal system. Now, when you talk about this, the old way, but beyond bribing, of course, this was a tweet from Chris Liu, who worked in the Obama White House. He said, former school official on Kushner getting into Harvard, quote, his GPA didn't warrant it. His SAT scores didn't warrant it. We thought for sure there was no way this was going to happen. Then lo and behold, Jared was accepted. His dad donated $2.5 million. Last night, Vice News and HBO had their piece where they interviewed a number of people who used to work in admissions. And they were very open where they said, this is the deal. This is what has happened. Where you have people who have made 6- and 7-figure donations for their children to be able to get in. And the reality is, yes, there might be some black folks out there who have that ability, but the reality is that we having a real honest conversation. We're talking about how white folks are gaming the system.
part of this reinforces this this thing that I always push on, which is that we have to stop seeking other people's validation. We have to stop thinking that just because you have a Harvard next to your name, you have a Yale next to your name, that makes you better than somebody who has
Now, here's the deal. I agree. No, Rob, here's the piece.
But it does open doors.
But here's the piece. I agree with that. The problem is this system has created that whole deal, and there are clear, defined benefits as a result. So, for instance, when President George W. Bush nominated Harriet Miers to the Supreme Court seat, now, conservatives were critical of her for a variety of reasons. But a big reason, this is what I heard. I'm sorry. He's nominating her? She went to Southern Methodist University. She went to SMU. The reality is, this current Supreme Court is literally a Yale and Harvard alumni association. The problem is that in this city, Republicans love talking about, oh, the elites, but they love the elites. If you go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, Columbia, Brown, Cornell, the Ivy Leagues, that's, the creme de la creme. Now, it might extend to Stanford University. Okay, Rice is considered the Harvard of the South. But this system buys into it. And so the reason you have all these people who look at the reaction that we give the videos when these black kids all of a sudden are waiting to see where they're going to get in. And then all of a sudden they get into Harvard and the room erupts and folks go crazy and it gets thousands upon thousands of views. Yet when a kid does the exact same thing for Howard or for Morehouse or for FAMU, not the same reaction. And so you can't help folks who are falling for that, because this country says if you go there, you are in a special class of people. This country presents that as they are truly the elite.
But that's why you have those parents again who are paying so much money for these kids to go to certain schools. And I think people at Duke will be mad for you calling Rice, because they think of themselves as the Harvard of the South.
Yeah, but they're not. Rice University can blow Duke. I mean, look. Rice is in Houston. They can blow Duke away, and Duke knows it too.
But the point is, there are certain schools that people are aspiring and they're shelling out for their kids to get into, because it's not just the name; it's the connections, it's the people that you can meet, and that's extending their privilege.
And the problem is, to Robert's point, which I absolutely agree with, you're not measuring people based upon can they do the job. Yeah. I have met some dumbass people who have gone to Ivy League schools. I have. And the reality is, you really want a system. Well, unfortunately, we know in this town, in New York as well, if you go to those places, you have a leg up on anyone else, because those institutions also promote that. There's a reason why Harvard and Yale has the two top universities in the country with the highest endowment. Yeah. Because you go there, they're going to usher you into those jobs. I was reading a piece in Vanity Fair about all of the comedy writers who are in Hollywood. I guess is it Hasty Puddings? I guess whatever the magazine in Harvard. So basically, essentially, Hasty Puddings is basically the internship to get on all of these major writing positions in Hollywood. And so forget the fact that you might know comedy elsewhere. It's, you worked on Hasty Puddings, guaranteed job. So what happens? These are the people who become writers on comedy shows and then in movies. And so all of a sudden, these are the people who all of a sudden are earning millions and millions of dollars. And so it becomes this little gateway, and that's unfortunately how the system works. And you may be a great talent who went to TSU or University of Houston, and you're trying to get in, but you didn't go to Harvard.
But the thing is, this is not a meritocracy. Like, let's stop this pretense. It's not a meritocracy. It's not necessarily. When I grew up, my parents grew up in Jim Crow, Mississippi. My mama used to always tell me, you got to work twice as hard to be seen just as good. And I actually took that to heart, and I actually believed it. And I worked my butt off to get into college, to graduate from college, to get a scholarship, to do all this. And then I come to find out, oh, wait, the girl next to me sitting, her dad is a famous photographer. I went to one of those schools you named. She has New York Times following her around on campus and talking about her life. And I said, but girlfriend's coming to me for helps in my notes because she
Right.
doesn't understand. But the thing is, this is not a meritocracy, and that's one thing we've got to be like flat out honest about.
Go ahead, Robert. Go ahead.
Well, I think my Aunt Annie had to say anything about this. She died when she was 106. She went to Tuskegee Institute, New Booker T, Washington. She said the only way to change it is to change it. And until we put ourselves in that mindset of understanding that we can build our institutions to be exactly the same, we can give the same leg up to people at Howard and Clark and Spelman and Morehouse as they did. We can open those doors for people behind us. That's how they create that pipeline.
But it's not. But here's the piece. I think that people watching need to understand this. It's not just the creation of the institution. What it means is that when you get in a position of authority, you cannot conform to their standard.
And you got to reach
that was one of the, look, I said it. Think about it. When is the last non-Ivy League Supreme Court justice we've had? My deal is, expand that. Go beyond where that's now the gold standard. And so the thing is, when we get in positions of power, you got to have people say, no. We're going to recruit the HBCUs. No, we're going to pull from here. I'm not going to fall into the deal. My biggest thing in television, I say Jeff Zucker, 25 years old, became executive producer of the Today Show. And when you look at all these other different people, I mean, I read these stories, and so-and-so was 29 years old and all of a sudden became executive vice president of this, that, and the other, and bureau chief or whatever. And I always go, what are black people? What a 29-year-old? Because you can't convince me that you don't have black people who are brilliant at 23 and 24. But the reality is, you go to these places, and here's the other piece, black parents can't afford to have their kids go intern somewhere for free, okay, paying their rent. And so what happens is we then are frozen out of that ecosystem. And so that's why, now you say it all the time, I go to deadline.com every single day, and I look at who got promoted. And I look at who got hired at this company and at that company. And rarely do I see somebody black getting one of these jobs. And I go through this every day, and I'm going, you can't tell me we can't be the CMO or we can't be the person in this job, but that this system that freezes us out, elite institutions, freezes us out of the high-paying jobs, which goes to wealth creation as well. That entire system is how we are frozen out of all of these positions of influence and power, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's hedge funds, whether it's politics, whether it's Silicon Valley. That is the American system that was designed to keep black folks out. And that's exactly how this thing is being played. So I can't wait to see who may possibly go to jail on this one.
I'd like to see them all.
All right,
I'd like to see them all.
Take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about more news of the day. Back on Roland Martin Unfiltered in a moment. Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. All right, folks, a lot of us trying to get healthy in 2019. Some of us trying to get fit, get ready for, of course, upcoming spring and summer when this cold weather decides to go away. And so one of the things that I did, of course, with the is go through the D-Herbs Full Body Cleanse. They have 27 different cleanses that you can actually try, which allow you to remove toxicity from your body, those processed foods and the fried foods. That can also put more pep in your step and give you more energy as well. If you want to try the D-Herbs Full Body Cleanse, go to dherbs.com, dherbs.com, or you can also call 1-866-4-DHERBS, 1-866-4-DHERBS. Now, when you go to checkout, please use the promo code Roland to get a discount. If you want to lose some weight and improve your overall well-being, try the D-Herbs Full Body Cleanse. Again, dherbs.com or 1-866-4-DHERBS. And don't forget to use the promo code Roland. And we certainly appreciate D-Herbs being a partner here at Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, folks. We talk about any number of different things. I mean, you take your pick. The Senate. Just nuts. I mean, I can't even tell you, anytime Mitch McConnell runs his mouth, he actually drives me crazy. So earlier today, we sat down with Senator Doug Jones. He came by to talk about his new book, bending towards justice, the Birmingham church bombings that changed the course of civil rights. And we're going to have that great interview later. But it was real interesting in the conversation when we talked to him, because we talked to him again about the college admission scandals. We talked about terms of justice. But one of the things that I asked him, when I asked him the whole issue of will these parents actually go to jail, really it's about these two systems, the two systems that we have in this country of justice. And we keep seeing this in numerous stories over and over. Two systems of justice. But it's not just justice. It's two systems when it comes to education, two systems when it comes to economics, two systems when it comes to who gets capital and who doesn't. The question is, how do you change it? Now, Senator Jones says that he's trying to use his power in the Senate to change that through various bills. Senator Elizabeth Warren is saying she's trying to change those things as she is running for president. We also talked to her today. Here is that conversation. One of the issues that a lot of our viewers have been talking about, and that is this college scandal that's been taking place. As many of us, we've dealt with people who can criticize affirmative action programs, things along those lines, but to have these rich parents, mostly white, essentially buying their way into colleges and universities, it's also revived this whole issue of legacy admissions, where it was really based upon your parents and your grandparents. And I asked President George W. Bush this 15 years ago, and I'll ask you, that is, should there be legacy in college admissions? Because shouldn't it be based upon really your merits as opposed to who your mom and your dad, your grandfather, your grandmother was?
Well, for somebody who went to a commuter college that cost $50 a semester, I kind of come down on the side of you got to get out there and row your own boat. And I just want to know that when I'm out there rowing my boat, that I've at least got a chance to row equally against everybody else. And when kids are getting a leg up, that's a real problem. And of course, this particular scam is one that just is. I only know what I'm seeing in the papers, but it really is disturbing.
So you believe legacy should not be used? It should solely be based upon your merit, your grades, and other things that are outlined, not your legacy.
So I think what matters the most and should matter the most is what it is that you produce. What your grades are like, what your test scores are like, and what experiences you've had. This is about admitting somebody to school based on what they've been able to carve out in their lives. Now, look, you always got to stop there and say, that still doesn't mean the playing field's level for everybody. Not in a world where public schools differ dramatically, where some kids can afford to get a bucket of tutoring. And it goes all the way back. I think you know this, Roland, that I've put out now a universal child care and pre-K proposal that would cover all of our kids, 0 to 5, and make sure that they all have high-quality child care and access to first-rate learning experiences for the 5-year-olds, for the 4-year-olds, for the 3-year-olds, for the 2-year-olds. Because here's the deal. The well-to-do parents are getting those experiences for their children, but families that don't have a bucket of money can't do that. And so I see this child care bill putting the money in so there really is universal high-quality child care. I see this as a real place to start the process of making sure that every kid, not just the kids of rich people, but every kid has a chance to build something in his or her life.
So if we take that, we also take, of course, the recent study that showed that schools where white students are largely going to or get $23 billion more, what we see is from beginning to end, whether it's pre-K, whether it's elementary school, middle school, high school, and then college, we're seeing these inequities. And so for African Americans, my audience in particular, people talk about, oh no, we were measuring folks the same. But the reality is, if you are black in America, you are dealing with inequality when it comes to schools, literally from the moment folks are born and they're going into pre-K all the way through college. And to have a white dropout make more money than a college graduate, what does that say about this nation?
Boy, you hit the nail on the head on that one. And in fact, among our most under-resourced schools are the HBCUs, which serve often first generation in college, a lot of young people who've had really challenging backgrounds in terms of what's been available in the public school system. And they come to these wonderful colleges and universities. But those colleges and universities are not getting the kind of federal support that I think they should be entitled to. You know, if we really want to have a level playing field, then that means we've got to be willing to invest the resources at a minimum from birth through whenever you finish your education, whether you finish in high school, whether you finish in technical school, whether you finish at 4 years at college, whether you finish at a graduate degree. But we've got to make sure that the quality is high and that everybody's got access. And when I say access, I don't mean access if you're willing to take on a double bucket of student loan debt. As you probably know, Roland, African-American students take on more student loan debt and then have more trouble paying that debt after they graduate because they get hit by the double whammy of coming from families where they need to borrow more money, and then when they get out of school, ending up in jobs that don't pay as well. And that's just one more place where the system, may all look neutral on its face. But I'm telling you, that's not how it works out. And that's why we've got to fight back on this.
A couple of more questions. First off, today we have 2.6 million black-owned businesses in America. Several years ago, we had 1.9 million black-owned businesses. But when we had 1.9 million black-owned businesses, they were doing an average revenue of about $110,000. Today, it's $54,000. So we have 700,000 more. They're doing less. One of the issues is also access to capital. One of the problems is that when you look at, for many African Americans, the only collateral they have is their home. But when you look at the home foreclosure crisis, when you were on my show, Washington Watch, we talked about this, where black folks lost 53% of wealth during the home foreclosure crisis. And you said then that it would take 2 generations to recoup that. If you're president, how are you proposing to deal with access to capital for black-owned businesses to be able to grow capacity, to be able to build and grow, go beyond one employee? Then also this housing crisis, which still is impacting us, that black people have never gotten above 50% home ownership.
Yes. So I'm glad you asked about both of these, because these are right in the spaces, as you know, where I work all the time. On the question of access to capital, look, these banks are regulated institutions. They get a license, basically, from the federal government to operate a monopoly or a near monopoly. And that means they have a responsibility back to their communities. And we don't have bank regulators now, in my view, who are pushing hard enough on this. Responsibility back to the community means, in part, making money available so that small businesses get a chance to get their feet good and strong and then grow. And that is a particular problem in black and brown communities. So for openers, you don't even have to have a change in the law. You don't have to get a law through Congress. What you need are some regulators who are really committed on this. And I promise you, in a Warren administration, this is something I'm on top of. On the housing, I've got a housing proposal right now that would be historic, making a new investment in housing. It would be over 3 million new housing units. They would be in cities, in rural areas. This would be about housing for middle-class families, working-class families, the working poor, and the poor. And it specifically calls out in this bill the impact of redlining and the impact of the mortgage foreclosure crisis, which 1-2 punch has kept African-American families from being able to get homes in the first instance and then having their homes taken away from them in the case of what happened during the deregulatory period that led up to the financial crisis and the foreclosures that occurred after that. And what my bill says is that for people who live in these formerly redlined areas and certain low-income neighborhoods, we're going to make down payment assistance available so that they can get a foot in the door to start building up some wealth. So far as I know, this is the first time that there has been a bill like this that specifically addresses the discrimination that the federal government itself enforced back for decade after decade, and that specifically addresses the fact that the regulators just ignored what was happening in African-American communities during the build-up to the financial crisis and immediately afterwards. You know, I think it's important to acknowledge what's gone wrong and take steps in the direction of remediating it, and that's what my housing bill is all about. And I've got a lot of good co-sponsors on this, and I think it's just terrific. So this is part of what I'm going to be talking about when I'm headed out over the next Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I'm going to be in Tennessee, and I'm going to be in Mississippi, and I'm going to be in Alabama, and I'm hoping to talk about this bill.
Well, I certainly look forward to those conversations, and certainly be great to have this discussion in one of those places, talking to African Americans, and we would love to be able to moderate that town hall because our audience has lots of other questions on many other issues. And when I watch these other town halls on these mainstream networks, they really aren't talking about the things that we actually care about. And so we would love to do that with you and even some of the other candidates.
Well, I would love to do it too. You know, I should tell you, I've already got scheduled a CNN town hall for Monday night, and it's going to be at Jackson State University. As you know, quite famous, historically black college. A lot of folks are doing their town halls elsewhere. I wanted to be able to do this one at a college like Jackson State. I wanted to be able to do it in Mississippi. I wanted to be able to talk about issues that I think are important to people all around this country. I want to go everywhere, talk to everyone. I think this is how we build a grassroots movement, not only to win in 2020 and not only to win the White House, but also to take back the Senate, to take back some of our state houses and the governor's mansions. But after we win those elections, to start making real change in January 2021, because that's really the point of this fight. We got to be an America that doesn't just work for a thin slice at the top. We've got to be an America that works for everyone.
All right. We're looking forward to that conversation. Look, I'm from Texas, so I'm sure my folks at Houston-Tillotson or Texas Southern University of Prairie View would love to have you on their campuses. So we'll make that thing happen.
I'd love it.
I
love it. You know, I'm a University of Houston grad.
Oh, well, see, I went to Yates High
Yep.
School. Yates High School is across the street.
That's right.
So matter of fact,
right.
matter of fact, why don't we do this here? You know what? They're all going to all these other places. Let's do it at a high school like Jack Yates.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Sounds like fun. Let's see what we can arrange.
I will call.
You're the best on this. Roland.
Promise you.
We want to get out there for everybody.
I will call the Houston superintendent, and I will make that happen.
All
right, cool. I appreciate it. And, of course, I've already called the superintendent for Houston Independence Public Schools, and she loves the idea, and so we'll certainly let you know when we have that forum at Jack Yates High School with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Y'all know I don't play around when we're talking about that. All right, folks, let's go to our HBCU Giving Day School. Roll it. All right, Mississippi Valley State, founded in 1950, of course, located in Itta, Mississippi. Some of its notable graduates include Hall of Famer Jerry Rice, Willie Toten, Deacon Jones, David Lee Jordan, and more. If you want to support Mississippi Valley State, go to mbsu.edu, mbsu.edu. All right, folks, calling all HBCU alumni, students, and leaders enter the Ford Motor Company HBC-You Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement their proposal. The deadline to apply is March 31st, 2019. Go to FGB.Life for more information and to apply. Remember, Ford goes further in our community. All right, folks, Friendship Charter Teacher of the Year event took place on Saturday. I was a host of that particular event, and they crowned their Teacher of the Year. There were 7 finalists, and so we showed you on Monday the person who won the Teacher of the Year, but we also wanted to show you some of the other finalists. And so here's Jendiah Wright of Friendship Blow Pierce.
I need an adjective to describe the word Wednesday. Yes, Riley? Wonderful.
I feel like it's home. I started with Friendship as a student. I graduated from collegiate, and then I came back after graduating college, and I was afforded opportunities to work here, given a position to teach. Because of that, I am where I am.
Anytime you go into a room, there's this buzz of activity, you know, whether it's students interacting with their environment, having conversations with one another. She really encouraged them to communicate with each other by asking them questions, to get them thinking about critical thinking and to be creative. And doing all that, she helps them find their voice, to really find out who they are and express themselves.
When we've been working on a skill and they don't get it quite yet, and then we continue to work and persevere and push through, and then they get it, they're so excited. And in my class this year, the atmosphere is we congratulate them when they get it. So everybody is so excited.
Good job. Way to go, Travis.
I like this ride because she's fun. We learn to read and write our name.
When I go into the classroom, my goal is to reach all of my students, but I know that if I just reach 1 or 2, then I have the power to change their lives, and then from changing their lives, their whole family can change.
When you think about how much time your child spends at school and being able to put your child in the hands of someone that is so loving and caring, it gives me peace of mind while I'm at work, while also making me feel comfortable with her being a part of Carson's community and raising her.
Because they belong to me. For the however many months I have them, they belong to me. They are my students, and so they are my children, and I treat them like my children. And so I am their voice until their voice is loud enough.
Hey, Black Child, do you know who you are, who you really are? Do you know who you can be, what you want to be? Hey, Canada, what you better? Hey, Black Child.
Good job. Give him a hug.
All right, folks, I'm looking for something right here. I want to ask my panelists this here. And so I'll see if y'all going to, what y'all think about this here. And so I think one of the mistakes that we make in our society is how we celebrate teachers. And so I remember a few years ago, literally I'm looking at one of these years, it was like 2010. And I was going through the airport, and Henry, do you see my phone? You see my phone? Okay, so Jeffrey Bean did these advertising. You might have seen them all in airports and train stations. They were called Rock Stars of Science. And so pull it up, please. You'll see one of them right here. You'll see here was another one here. So basically what they did was they did these Vanity Fair type photo shoots, these really interesting photo shoots where they celebrated these folks who are doctors and scientists and things along those lines. I believe that's how you have to re-engineer folks' minds in terms of how we look at teachers. It's no different to me like when I've told educators, we talk about folks, and if you want to play in the NBA, I say, well, why don't you show the people who work in the NBA but who aren't on the court? And you treat them as all-stars as well. So you redefine how we look at people as all-stars.
Well, I think it's a brilliant idea, and even right now with NFL free agency, we have reports on every single player. They could be the third string running back for Tampa Bay, and we know exactly how much money they're making, where they're going, because we celebrate those things in our society. Let's put that same emphasis on academics. Put that same emphasis on black CEOs, on black heads of nonprofit organizations, of people who are succeeding not in the way that we celebrate, not a singer, an actor, an athlete, but people who are succeeding with their minds. Because there are going to be way more black folks entering the workforce than entering the NBA in any given year.
But we have to, Deshaunda, just again redefine how we look at a particular position.
Well, if you want to redefine it, first you have to pay people a living wage. I mean, like, teachers, let's be honest with you, they're low paid. In my school district, every year when I go to budget hearings, teachers are coming asking for more money. A lot of them can't even afford to live into the county in which they teach. If you want to reframe how they're seen, first pay them a living wage, because that is validating what they're doing and validating the work that they're doing in the community and the service. So that's number one. Number two, you have the Trump administration, under Betsy DeVos, they're looking at cutting like student loan forgiveness programs. You got to be kidding me. If you want people to go into the profession and to excel, we've got to offer them additional incentives to do that. It's everyone looks at, being an NBA player, being a basketball star, these glamorous jobs where you're in front of the cameras. But again, how do they get there? What are the people, who coached them there? Who helped them get there? You're right, we're not celebrating those, but we're not even validating. We're not even saying that these positions are worthy because we can't pay them. And we're making it harder for people to want to get into the profession and stay into the profession.
Well, and again, I think that absolutely how we pay folks. Look, this is America. It's by capitalism, and where you put your money is where your mouth is. And I think that's also one of the issues there. And so one of the reasons we, of course, wanted to show you that particular Teacher of the Year is show you teachers who are doing great things in the classroom and how they're being recognized. So the folks at Friendship Public Charter School, they're doing that. Now on Friday, we're going to be in Los Angeles. So XQ America, they have their school initiative, and so over the year, you're going to see us partnering with XQ America on a number of these different things. And again, talking about the innovative things that are happening in the classroom and how do we improve education. So we'll be broadcasting live from their event on Friday. So we look forward to bringing that to you. Robert, Deshaunda, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Thank all of you for watching as well. Folks, many of you been tweeting me. Facebook has been down all day, so that's why we were not streaming on Facebook. But of course, you can tell folks to watch it on YouTube as well. And if you want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered, be sure to go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com and sign up for our Bring the Funk fan club. You can pay via Cash App, PayPal, or even Square. Every dollar you spend goes to supporting this show, us traveling around the country, bringing you the kind of news you're not going to get anywhere else. I shall see you guys tomorrow. Got to go. Holla!